Chapter 2, Job Performance. Job performance. What does it mean to be a good job performer? Got task performance, citizenship behavior, counterproductive behavior. So when it comes to thinking, people think in terms of job performance, a lot of times they think of good job performance meaning results. Only looking at the results. Well, if someone gets the most sales, if someone does the most this or completes the most tasks or whatever else, they think that that might be a good performer because they're really only looking at the results. But there's a lot of other things that you have to take in consideration, and we're going to talk about that in chapter 2. So the first thing we're going to talk about is task performance. This is where you look at and you have the, like, if you read a job description and you see those tasks and duties and responsibilities, that's where someone is actually doing those types of things. When you think in terms of the performance, task performance, they're performing the tasks and things that's uniquely suited for that job, or stated for that job. Citizenship behavior. Citizenship behavior is where you have someone that not only do they do the things that they're supposed to do in their job, the task performance and things along the, they do other things that's not in their job. A lot of times what you find is these are some of the people who do things that others don't do or others don't know about or others not aware who's doing it. For instance, you could have someone who's working on your job. I actually had a story, I heard someone that were telling me that they had a guy who worked on a job and everybody used to refer to him as the gopher and would kind of laugh at him and joke with him and stuff about being the gopher. Then one day the guy retired. Once he retired, they realized all the things that he was doing. And because there was things not getting done anymore, he was actually utilizing citizenship behavior and they didn't even know it. They found out and discovered it after he left. And so realistically, the joke was on them. Now they had to figure out ways to get these things done that he used to do. Counterproductive behavior. This is something where you refer to as intentional. This is never accidental or by chance. This is where someone intentionally does something that is counterproductive to the cause, to the organization, to an individual. Trends affecting performance. Knowledge work. Knowledge work is something, well, let me digress. In America, when you look back on it, you think in terms of when things started booming back in the Industrial Revolution and from up to present day. Historically, we had a lot of people who used to work and do things with their hands, duties and tasks with their hands. Well, in the 1990s, those things started to change and you started seeing more jobs growing, becoming knowledge work. They weren't required to do things with their hands. And it's more, a lot of times you hear them referred to as white collar. Well, those jobs are actually grew and became more and more. And right now they're the predominant types of jobs that we have in this country. And to give you an example, you take a IT guy, or accountant, someone along those lines. Like those guys do not do manual labor, and that's what when you talk about knowledge base, these guys don't do. These men and women don't do manual labor. They utilize their knowledge and education. Most of these people are college educated and experience in various different ways. Service work. This will be our second largest industry in the United States. Service work is when you think in terms of going to the restaurant and someone's waiting on you, taking your order, checking you in, seating you. If you go to a retail store, someone's waiting on you, selling you a suit, a dress, a pair of pants. That's service industry. If you go to the movies, someone's taking your ticket, someone's actually selling you the popcorn. Those kind of things are service. That's our second largest industry in this country. Gig work. Now, this is something that is becoming more prevalent. You're finding more people, particularly with millennials and Gen Z, we're seeing more people who they may be inclined to do gig work. So, and I'm seeing two different ways. One I'm seeing is where individuals have a job, but then they have a side job, sometimes referred to as a side hustle. And as a result of having that, they as a result of having that, they they try to work a full-time job, and then what they try to do is say, if I can get my side job or my gig work to pan out, then hopefully it makes me enough money that I can leave my full-time job. Then there's some other folks who says, you know what, I don't really have a full-time job, but I got like these gigs. I got 4 little gigs I put together, and these 4 little gigs will be something that would, if I look at the income that comes from all 4 of them, it would be equivalent to me having a full-time job. The difference is I have a lot of freedom to do what I want to do. So you see that when it comes to a lot of things that's transpired today. The behavioral model. So when we look at the integrated model of organizational behavior, this is when we look at it and we see the breakdown. This is the breakdown that you take into consideration when we're talking about organizational behavior. We're looking at the organization, we're looking at the group, and we're looking at the individual. So it's broken down in 3 areas, and all 3 of these things are important and necessary in order to assess organizational behavior. Because listen to what I'm saying. Things could be wrong within the organization, or things could be wrong within the group, or things could be wrong with the individual, just as much as things could be right in each one of those. So you see those 3 areas right there, and then you see the individual mechanisms, and you see your job satisfaction, stress, motivation, trust, justice, ethics, learning, and decision making. How these all are connected. But most importantly, if you look at the green, and this is what people will look at, this is the finished product. Individual outcomes. We're looking at job performance and organizational commitment. And it takes the chart, looking at the red and the blue to get what you have in the green. And it determines what happens in the red and the blue determines the outcome, what you get in the green. Is it good or bad or whatever else? Job performance. The value of the set of employee behaviors that contribute either positively or negatively to organizational goal accomplishment. So not the consequences or results of behavior, the behavior itself. So what's good about this distinction? What's bad about this distinction? So look, job performance. And I'm going to read this again. The value of the set of employee behaviors that contribute either positive or negative to an organizational goal accomplishment. Not the consequences or the result of the behavior itself. What's good about the distinction? Knowing what's good about the distinction is this. You know what to go try to fix. What's bad about the distinction is if someone is not doing their due diligence and not aware that there's a distinction. So there is one, but they may not be aware of it. The good thing about knowing that is, now you know what to address. For instance, if you have a situation where you think that we have some people who work first shift and second shift in a mill, and you look at it and you say, well, the people who work second shift are more productive. They have better job performance because they're getting better results. And okay, well, that may not be the case. So it may be some other things that may be actually the reason for that. And I'll come back to this later. What does it mean to be a good performer? Categories of behavior relevant to job performance. Task performance, citizenship, counterproductive. So again, the task performance is when you look at job descriptions, you see the duties and the task in there. When someone's actually performing those, that's when you talk about task performance. So they know what they're supposed to do and they are aware of it. Citizenship behavior is things volunteer that people voluntarily do. This is not in their job description. This is not things that they have to do. These are things that someone wants to do. And it's amazing to see that. Remember the example I gave you earlier about the guy who actually used to work at a company and people joked him about, being a gopher. They found out that they missed that gopher after he retired, but he was doing citizenship type stuff, things that they weren't aware of he was doing, which was making their life easier. And that's the thing about it. Remember, citizenship may not necessarily show up in production or results, but it does help in some capacity that you may or may not be aware of. Counterproductive behavior. Again, counterproductive behavior is always intentional. That is something that someone does and they know what they're doing when they do it. And it can happen at any level, whether it be at the organizational level or at the group level or at the individual level. So here again, task performance. The behavior is directly involved in transforming organizational resources into goods or services an organization produces. That is, the behaviors included in one's job. Remember I said the job description. That's where it's going to be. Now, typically, it's going to be a mix of these things. Routine tasks. These are the things that are going to be written, and you can read them and you can see them, and you know this is what you do pretty much on a daily basis. So that's kind of mundane. Nothing different. Just kind of like operate on automatic, on cruise control, because this is what you do all the time. Adaptive task performance. That is what happens when someone has to, let's just say something routine that you're working on and something happens and something goes wrong. Now you have to adapt to that situation. Now you're doing something that's not necessarily in the routine, it's not in the job description, but you got to adapt to be able to get this done. So you may have to come up with something to fix something, repair something, replace something, or do something different. But you have to adapt to something, and this is something that usually happens beyond your control. Now you have to adapt to it. That's task performance. So again, this is it's a reactive deal, but also too, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. For instance, when you adapt to something, are you doing it in a timely manner, or is it taking you way too long to adapt to it? So it makes a difference. Creative task performance. This is when you, in the course of doing the job or task, when you encounter something that you've never dealt with before. Now you have to come up with a way to deal with it. You have to come up with a way to deal with it. That's all. You don't have it in your blueprint. Now you have to figure it out. Get creative to come up with ways to get something done. You maybe encounter a problem that you've never encountered before. But at the end of the day, what management looks at is they don't really care. It's like, did you get the routine task done? Well, you may have a situation where you had a routine task that turned to something adaptive that ultimately turned into something creative, and you had to deal with really in all three areas. And if you do, then that means you have someone who's capable of functioning at all three levels. Behaviors involved in adaptability. So here you look at you see the behaviors on the left. You see the specific examples on the right. And notice when you look at right here, it says behavior, handling emergencies or crisis situations. The very first word you see right there is quickly. I cannot tell you how important that is. You've heard it before. Time is money. Money is time. This is something right here when quickly analyzing options for dealing with danger or crisis and their implications, making split-second decisions based on clear and focused thinking. You'd be surprised how many people make their living having to do this quite frequently. And I'll give you an example. Police officers on the street dealing with situations where it could go violent at any moment's notice. First responders, medical people, military people who are in combat and war. Or you take anybody, stock market, you look at stock brokers working on Wall Street. These have to make quick decisions. And so you have to do this a lot of times. But you notice the very first word up there was quickly. So I won't go through all of these. I'll let you read through them through your leisure. But but this, when it comes to adaptability, these are some of the things that people have to do. And because people are wired different, some people are better at this than others. Some people don't adapt well. And one of the biggest reasons why some people don't adapt well, they're risk averse. So realistically, if they're very good at routine, they're not good at adapting and definitely not good at being creative. So those people struggle when it comes to adapting and doing something different other than routine. Task performance. How do we identify relevant behaviors? Job analysis. Generate a list of activities involved in a job. Rate those tasks on frequent importance and use the frequent and important tasks to define task performance. So when we generate a list of activities involved in a job, that's usually done by where you put this list in front of people, like the people who do the job and the people who manage that job, and go to them to let them generate a list. They can tell you, hey, this is what we do on this job. These are some things we do right here. And they just throw out a bunch of things that they do. And they'll look at them and say, okay, do we have a complete list of things that you do? Yes. Now, then you take the list and you have decision makers that will look at it and say, okay, what's the rate that these tasks are, the frequency and importance of? And they go through and they look at the things that they do periodically, the things that they do sometimes, the things they do quite frequently, the things that they do routinely. And once they make that decision, then they'll come up, use the most frequent and important tasks to determine task performance. And then that's what you'll find a lot of times that'll be put into like job descriptions or learning objectives or whatever it may be. So, exercise, performance of a server, doing job analysis. First, list 4 major dimensions of the job. Identify 2 tasks per dimension. So, when you talk about looking at a job and doing a job analysis, you're going to list 4 dimensions of that job and identify 2 tasks per dimension. So, this is how you break it down. And you break it down. Start broad and break it down, and you're trying to determine, when we look at it, if I'm going to analyze this job, I want to see at its core what really exists for this job. So you're going to break it out into your dimensions, and then you're going to identify the task per dimension. By doing that, now you can actually say, you can write up something and say, you know what, these are the things that I'm going to consider when we go to assess this job. These things, right? And that would be different for every job analysis because it's based on the job. So everyone would be different. But this is what is involved, it entails to do a job analysis. Now, when we look at this, the federal government has put together some information, and it's through the Occupational Information Network, ONET, online. And what this does is, this is where you can go and for most jobs find out a summary of the task and types of behaviors that's expected to do that type of job. And here's one right here for flight attendants. And you'll be surprised how many different types of jobs you could find in here to actually go in there and get some information to see what it entails, the types of duties and tasks and behaviors that it would take to actually be able to do that job successfully. And you may be surprised and say, you know what, this is something I thought I might be interested in, but after reading this, I don't think so. So it's a good source of information for on various types of jobs, numerous types of jobs. And I would encourage everybody to take a look at that if you have ideas about type of jobs or careers you think you may want to pursue. Citizenship behavior. A future professor's account of an experience in a paper mill. So while the man's assistance was not part of his job and gained him no formal credits, he undeniably contributed in a small way to influencing of the group and by extension to the plant and the organization as a whole. By itself, of course, his aid to me might not have been perceptible in any conventional calculus or efficiency, production, or profits, but repeated many times over by himself and others over time. The aggregate of such actions must certainly have made the paper mill a more smoothly functioning organization than it would have been the case had such actions been rare. So what he's saying is this. Remember I said earlier, with citizenship, it may not show up in results or stuff like that, but what it does do is it makes people's job easier or helps things smooth things over. And people, most folks may not even be aware of how it's happening or who's doing it. That's what citizenship behavior is. So if you think about that, you would want to have a person or some persons like that working with you, for you. As future leaders, you would definitely want to have those type of people working for you, because they are really what we refer. You heard this thing called team players. They epitomize that. Okay, figure 2-2, types of citizenship. So we've got voluntarily activities that may or may not be rewarded, but that contribute to the organization by improving the quality of the setting where work occurs. So if we look at, we see the organizational and we see interpersonal. So you see citizenship has two areas up there. One, where things are being done that's actually being beneficial primarily to the organization. The others being primarily amongst people. So let's take a look at voice. Voice would be, when you talk about the voice, this is where someone would be inclined to speak up. Let's say that they saw something that was wrong, but other people are afraid to speak up about it. Well, this person would speak up and say, and tell management and stuff, you know what? Well, I want to tell you what I saw, and I'm going to tell you what I think is the problem. They're not afraid to do that. That's the voice. and they will not, those type of people are cut. And when they do that, they're coming from a positive place. They're not trying to embarrass anybody or, or show off that they're smarter than anybody else. They're really coming from a good location in their heart and their head, but they will speak up with the voice. Civic virtue. This is where you have individuals who may be inclined to say, to go to group meetings within the organization to try to gain knowledge so that they can help other individuals. They volunteer, do these kind of things. You've heard sometimes some people refer to it as your civic duty. Well, these are things that you don't have to do, but these are things that they want to do. And they want to make sure that, that they're involved in things so that they can help other people do stuff. Boosterism. This is when you have individuals who actually, they like the organization, they like who they work for, they feel good about their job. If you met that person on the street, they would tell you how they like their organization, they like who they work for, and they like their job. And this is not something they're required to do, but it's something that they do, and they'll do it anywhere outside of the workplace at any time. Helping, obviously, when you look at helping, it's when you want to help people, and you're just making sure that you do the same. It's really self-explanatory. Any opportunities that you get to help other individuals, then people are doing it. And that can be in so many different ways. And here's the one thing I can tell you about the helping. The helping is done in a way that's needed. Basically, whatever the helper sees that needs to be done is what the helper is willing to do. Versus saying, well, this is what I think should be done or whatever. No, they'll let the situation dictate to them what needs to be done. Courtesy. When you think in terms of the courtesy is exactly how it sounds. Having courtesy when you're dealing with others with respect within the workplace. Being courteous to others. These are some of the things that when you do that, it makes people like working with you, like working with people like that, because they're respectful and they think of others before they think of themselves. They think of the group before they think of themselves. So it's something that goes over real in the workplace. Sportsmanship. You've always heard sportsmanship when it comes to sports, and where that comes from, sportsmanship. And you refer to as good sportsmanship and bad sportsmanship. But people who utilize good sportsmanship, they're also looking to be folks who are looking to help out and be resourceful and do things. And again, they do stuff that's not in their job description. And you want to see people who are coming through and they're involved in these types of things. So when you bring all of these things together, you see the different type of citizenship behaviors. And these are all positive. Levels of service and innovation, helping. Assisting new coworkers or those with heavier workloads. Again, what we talked about the helping. Courtesy. Keeping coworkers informed about matters that are relevant to them. Remember I said going to meetings and doing stuff. This is why they do that. So they can actually bring information back and share it with other people. That's the courtesy. Sportsmanship. Maintain a positive attitude with coworkers. We see it in sports. You have two teams, and I'm going to use a sports analogy. You have two teams that are playing, and they're really hot and heavy for the championship. And one guy actually knocks another guy down. Well, then he walks over and extends his hand to help him get up. That's sportsmanship. And see, that's sportsmanship with a competitor, not even a coworker. But everybody, some people have problems defining what sportsmanship is, but everybody knows it when they see it. Helping. So here's something that you utilize when you're trying to gauge your people, your organization, or your group to see how they are, or an individual to try to see what they're like when it comes to being helpful in the workplace. And you see we have number 1, strong disagree, all the way up to 7, strongly agree. And then people go through and you rate that on the right, and then you total it up. You see the average score is 40. So realistically, if you had, particularly what type of job that you had, what someone was doing, that would vary. I'll give you an example. If someone's an accountant and they primarily work by themselves, they're on a team, but they probably work by themselves doing numbers. It may not be that important for them to have a high score here because they're not required to do much of that type of work. But if you have somebody who's working in an assembly capacity or somebody who's working in a team type of environment, that's going to be very important because when it comes to that, now you look at it, the work group, the team, it's only strong as its weakest link. So if you've got 10 people on the team, 9 of them pulling in the same direction because they're working together, and then one's pulling in the opposite direction because they about self-preservation, that's going to be an issue. But this is where you would probably find something like that may show up in this type of a survey. Sportsmanship, same here. You can gauge it and you look at it again. 1 being strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree. And I'm gonna read these because I want you. This is really important. I never complain about the small stuff. No, because what good sportsmen know is there's going to come a time when something big is going to happen or something I really need to complain about. So I'm not going to complain about this little stuff. I voice support for what's going on in the organization. Again, they will speak up to say, you know what? I'm supporting these things right here, this right. But they're also speaking up to support things or to tell you when things are not working. This is also how they support the organization by bringing truth to the light. I focus on maintaining a positive attitude at work. Positivity breeds positivity. One of the things you find that these kind of people, I've actually seen someone in my circles, in my career, I've actually seen a couple people get hired. They weren't the most qualified. They were maybe like the second best qualified, but they had the best attitude. And what they ultimately were told by the hiring managers is this: you weren't the most qualified, but you are the best fit for this team. After these people got hired, they were told it was your positive attitude. And I have a team right now that's struggling with that. I wanted to bring somebody in who had a positive attitude. So this is very important. People have gotten hired because of that. I tend to dwell on what's going on, not what's going poorly. So basically, are you the type of person that looks at it and says, I see the glass as half full or half empty? Seeing the glass as half full is being positive. Seeing the glass as half empty is being negative. So realistically, why dwell on the negative? Because that's really counterproductive. It's not going to help you fix problems and issues. I tend to look at, things are going well. Let's focus on that. Let's identify what went wrong and find ways to implement it. But you have a good attitude about doing it. And we're going to concentrate on what's going well. I focus on being a good sport, even when negative things happen. Again, it's maintaining that positive attitude. And this is something that's even more important when people become leaders. Because Leaders set the tone for everybody that works for them. So if you have leaders who are getting upset and have negative things going on with them, guess what happened to their people? They follow their lead. Organizational citizenship behaviors. Voice. Speaking up and offering constructive suggestions to improve unit or organizational functions or to address problems. And every time when we say speak up like this, what we're talking about is coming from a positive place, not negativity. Civic virtue, participating in the company's operations at a deeper than normal level. Basically, this is not required of someone. This is what someone chooses to do, to try to make things better in the workplace. Like I said, going to different group meetings and stuff, bringing back information shared with other people that might be beneficial. Boosterism, representing the organization in a positive way. In a positive way when they're outside of the office. That's on the streets. Or anywhere you see them, they're representing their organization properly. And I don't mean wearing paraphernalia. I mean what they say and how they feel about it and what they reflect about the organization. Figure 2-3, types of counterproductive behavior. Employee behaviors that intentionally hinder organizational goal accomplishment. Okay, so now we're looking at counterproductive. So we know everything up here is negative. So production deviance. Production deviance is when you have undisciplined people, intentionally or unintentionally, usually intentionally because it's deviance, doing things. I'll give you an example. Somebody who's required to make something and it involves ingredients and it's supposed to be certain measurements that's supposed to be followed. They don't follow them at all. And they just go in there and do something nilly-willy. And so that's production of deviance. People not giving you good effort. When people showing up late, leaving early. Those are issues where you use of production deviance. Substance abuse. If you have people who have substance abuse issues and they're working for you, here's the thing you have to understand. It may not be a bad person, but if they actually get in a bad way and they truly need drugs and their body is aching for it, and it's almost like a craving, then they have to do what they have to do, whether that means bring some to work or buy some from somebody at work. But realistically, that's something that has to be addressed. And this is what I tell people, those people have to be helped. And if you can help them through your employee assistance program, that's fine. If you can't, ultimately, you have to find ways to get rid of them if they cannot find ways to help themselves out. Here's what I do know is, and this is after talking to numerous drug addicts, you can't help them if they don't want to help themselves. And if you have a situation like that, then that's unfortunate, and you will probably have to let the person go. Property deviance. This is sabotage. This is when people do things intentionally to try to damage or tear up or alter property. A lot of times you find that will come from people who are actually either employed by you or got dealings with the organization in some capacity. And then you have theft. Theft, a lot of times, is referred to in corporate America, particularly in the retail industry, as shrinkage. There's a large percentage of that that comes back to people who work for you, employees. A large percentage of theft happens by people who actually work in these establishments. Think in terms of retail, along those lines. But when you're talking about that, they have whole departments now set up called loss prevention to try to track and stay on top of shrink and theft, because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry per year in losses for organizations collectively speaking. Political deviance. Okay, you see the word political, don't think in terms of politics in a traditional sense. This is talking about something different. This is primarily talking about things along the lines like gossiping, spreading false stuff and innuendo about someone in the workplace Uh-oh, I lost the place here. Okay, sorry about that. So, it's gossip, spreading false information about people in the workplace, and lies even. So, but bottom line is sowing discord, some capacity, incivility. This is basically just being disrespectful for people, using foul language and saying things bad and negative stuff to people that hurts people's feelings. And this is something that, for some reason, there are some people who feel like that's okay to do that, and we don't understand why. At the end of the day, it's like it just doesn't make good sense for people to be that way. But you have some people who are just willing to do it, and we don't understand the reason why. So political deviance, you know, here's, you look at it, this is a chart like we had before. You see you got an average score down there. But this is where you, I won't read all of these, but this is how you take a look at it to see if you have that going on. And this is something you have to address, because this is ultimately like a cancer. You have to address those, as particularly as leaders. You have to address those as leaders, because this is counterproductive and it can destroy the workplace. Because now what happens is, if you've got people who are there doing this, they form little cliques, and it's kind of like it divides. You have a us and them, or we and we and them, whatever else. And me, as a former leader in the United States Army, this is something that I had to deal with a time or two myself. So, but it does have to be addressed, and you ultimately have to figure out who is the cause of it, or what persons may be the cause of it, and then you have to implement some type of corrective action. Counterproductive behavior. Key questions. Are these all examples of the same general behavior pattern? If you do one, are you likely to do most of the others? Absolutely not. It's based on the type of person you are. And let me explain something with behaviors. This is something that just doesn't happen. People do things because of who they are and what they've experienced. So if you look at somebody's background, where they come from, and their personality, it will tell you a lot about them. It may help you understand why they're the way they are. because he's prone to, let's just say, the guys, he may be prone to gossip about folks. That doesn't mean he's inclined to go steal. Involved in theft. So no, absolutely not. One doesn't mean you're prone to do the others. How does counterproductivity behavior relate to task performance and citizenship behavior? It contradicts that. It's those two things are positive in nature. Counterproductivity is negative. So they're polar opposites. So if you've got someone who's actually doing counterproductive type behavior, engaging in that, they are definitely not doing what these other two do. Other people are doing, engaging in task performance and citizenship behavior. And that won't be hard to recognize the difference. Research using both anonymous self-reports and supervisor rating tends to find strong correlations between the categories. So going back to what the slide we just looked at. So research shows both anonymous self-reports and supervisor ratings tend to find strong correlations between both categories. Counterproductivity behavior is a strong negative correlation with citizenship behavior, but is only weakly related to tasks. So again, positive and negative. You see. And this was, we'll skip this slide, but this was a movie Ad Astra starring Brad Pitt. So 2.4, what does it mean to be a good performer? So when we look at being a good performer, you see the chart here. And when we look at this chart, we see the routine, adaptive, and creative. And so when we see that, you also see task performance, citizenship, and counterproductive behaviors. Notice that the end goal right here again is job performance. When you see in the green, all three of those connect. Now, determining what you get in the blue and what you get in the red determines the job and performance output results in the green. And that's going to always be different for each person or for each unit or each group or each organization. But if you've got some issues in that green with that job performance, it's not somewhere it's supposed to be. You have to go back and look into the blue, and you got to look into the red to figure out what's the problem, because they're all interconnected. Trends affecting the performance. Knowledge work, cognitive and emphasis, fluid, dynamic in nature. Remember I told you, this is the bulk of the new type of work that's growing in the United States. And when you see people, particularly if they're college educated folks, a lot of times, many of them will end up in the industries where they're knowledge work, cognitive emphasis. So you're being paid for your brain power, not your back. Not your arms, not lifting and moving and physical stuff. You're being paid for your cognitive ability. And one of the things that's valued is people who are fluid and dynamic in nature, meaning you can think on your feet. You can make decisions quickly. In many of these career fields, that requires people who can actually think on their feet and react to situations and stuff appropriately. And I will tell you this, not making a decision is making a decision. So it can't be one of those kind of things where, you know what, I'm just going to look like the deer in headlights and I'm going to panic and I'm not going to make a decision right now. Well, guess what? Time is money. Money is time. You have to make a decision. And that's what that fluid and dynamic in nature is. Service work. Remember, I told you this is the second fastest growing area in the country. Providing non-tangible goods to customers requires direct interaction with customers. Emphasizes the need for high levels of citizenship behavior and low levels of counterproductive behavior. So imagine that you are a retail clerk, or I should say you encounter a retail clerk who's low in citizenship behavior but high in counterproductive behavior. I can tell you right off the bat, this is a person you wouldn't buy from. As a matter of fact, you may actually go and complain to the manager about that person. This is absolutely a must. People who have good, we refer to them as people skills. You see that a lot of times, emphasis in high levels of citizenship behavior and low levels. They make you feel welcome when you come into the place. They greet you with a smile. They help you. They ask you, can they help you? They assist you getting to where you need to go. They help you the whole time you're in there. That's because they're high in citizenship, and that's part of their job. So that's something that's very important for them. Gig work. Prevalent either as a primary job or secondary job or side hustle, requires workers to take on responsibility for their own performance. So again, when I'm seeing this now, and I can tell you, this is something that's grown throughout the years. When I was a young man and starting out, you didn't see too many people that were doing gig hustles, not like you do today. And it's almost like even though some of them may work a 9-to-5 job and work for a company, they still have an entrepreneur spirit. And so they want to have their own little side business. And it's for their own reasons, whatever it may be. But I've met people who said, I'm trying to do my side hustle, but I want it to be my full-time job eventually. So I'm trying to grow it in a part-time capacity. And when it makes enough money, I'm going to leave my job and do this. And other people say, you know what? This is always going to be a side hustle, but it's a steady flow of income for me. And I'm going to keep doing it for as long as I can. I got a good job that pays me well and provides my benefits, but my side hustle is how, someone says, I take this. I've heard someone say, this is how I pay for my kids' education, college education, through my side hustle. Application performance management. What tools do organizations use to manage job performance amongst employees? Management by objectives. Okay, management by objectives. This is where you look at this one and and I'll give you an example. A manager and employee, they get together and they talk about the objectives for the job. You are going to have so many widgets made this week. We're going to decrease our downtime with the machines, about 20%. Management by objectives. So they know exactly what it is they're supposed to do. This is very task oriented, by the way. When you're looking at duties and tasks and responsibilities and stuff, It could be that, hey, we're going to look to try to increase our sales by this amount this year. So it's management by objective. So a lot of times this is where you have the manager working with someone, or managers have set it up where people understand what it is they're supposed to do. And they are objectives, results oriented. Behavioral anchor rating scale. This is where you're not looking at the results. You're looking at the behavior that gets the results. And because you're looking at the behavior, you can try to figure out, well, we're not getting the results, but what's the behavior that was actually going on that caused us to get a subpar result? And by doing that, you can determine, say, you know what? This is where I look at it and say, we need to look at this issue right here that they're doing right here. So we're looking at the behavior, and now we can say, this is what we need to change to get better results. 360-degree feedback. 360-degree feedback is where you have, this is usually reserved for leaders. I've done my fair share of these. Sometimes you hear referred to as 360-degree assessment. And let me explain to you exactly what that is. This is where you have a leader, normally a leader, and they have agreed to participate in this feedback, this assessment. So what will happen is they will usually provide you a group of some names of some people who work for them, work with them, and who they work for. And these people will send you would send these people some questionnaires about the client, the leader. They will complete them, send them in, and then you collect them. Well, the leader doesn't get to see those. The coach gets to see those, and he takes a look at them, and then he gives the results to the leader and stuff, and they look at it. It's usually in a chart form, and they just sit there and tell them, well, this is what people say about you, observed about you. So now you're getting feedback from people that works for the leader, people that works with him on the same level, and a person or two above him. So that's 360 degrees, what they're referring to. Force rankings. This is something that it was really big, I think, back in the 80s, maybe. It's not as big as it used to be, but what it refers to is when you have a situation where a manager comes through and say, okay, I need you to rank your people. Tell every manager, rank your people. And then when they rank them, they're going to fall into three categories. And I'm going to come on back and touch on this in a minute, again, about the force ranking there in a minute. Social performance management. And this is something that is, I'm going to say, is fairly new compared to the other things. And this is where you may have managers and organizations where they're promoting people to track things through social media, make entries on social media about their work day, how things went, and be open about it and share it with other folks. This is something that's, I'm going to predict you're going to see more of this as people, particularly as younger people who actually grew up doing the social media craze versus older people. But this is something that's going to be new, and you're going to see more of it. But I'm interested to see just how far this really goes. So when we look at the behavior anchors in observing behavior, you see here's a chart, how you rate that. So give you an example, if you have a leadership that was observing an employee, and they're looking at, remember I told you, they're not looking at they know they're getting bad results. Let's just say in this particular case, they're getting bad results. What they want to find out is what's the behavior that's going on that's getting those results. So they know they have bad results. So they're not just going to look at it and say, hey, we got bad results, you need to fix that. Hey, let's find out why we're getting them. Let's look at the behavior. So you see on the left, you see ranking, and you see on the right, you see behavioral anchors. This is what they would look at when they try to go through and do that. And they would do that for every job within the organization. And here's a continuation of that to go to show you it goes all the way down to unacceptable. And I can say pretty much if you get to the point where you're getting an unacceptable and stuff and very poor, that's probably folks that would be slotted probably for separation at some point. So going back to our force ranking, here's the chart, and this is what I wanted to get to. This is something that was implemented by GE, and GE has there's a guy who's very famous, Jack Welch, who used to be the CEO of GE during his heyday, during his big boom. And one of the things that he started was this vitality curve. So what he says is, he tells every manager, I want you to rank your people. And so on this curve, this is what he says. And so you look at the curve and you see it. You see top 20%. These are the stars. These are the ones who show a lot of initiative, and they're the go-getters. Those are the ones who's going to lead you into the future, because they'll be creative and they show initiative and all this other stuff. The vital 70%, these are the backbone of the organization. They're not going to lead you. They're not going to be creative, and they're not going to figure out stuff, but they're going to be reliable, and they're going to be productive, and they're going to do basically what you need them to do to get things done. That's why they call it the backbone. That's what's keeping the company supported. In the red, the bottom 10%, these are your unproductive people. So these are the people, if you had a reorganization or you had to do a layoff some folks, it would be these people. Or if you have to terminate somebody, it would be in this bottom 10%. Because at that point in time, what you're saying is these are the people who are not really contributing. They're kind of holding things down and holding progress back. Now, the reason I said earlier that this is something that used to be something pretty prevalent is not as prevalent anymore. One of the criticisms of this force ranking was this, and I'll give you an example. What if you had a manager who says, well, I have people who are studs and duds. I have people who are studs and stars and they do good and future leaders in my top 20%. But the rest of my folks are and they wouldn't be in the next 70, they'd be the next 90. Well, under this right here, it's almost like you got to be forced to say, well, somebody's got to be at the bottom. Who's at the bottom? Well, what if the manager says, well, I don't really have anybody who's that. No, you got to have somebody's at the bottom. Who is at the bottom? So it's almost like they were forced to say some workers who were good or all right were actually bad when they didn't want to. And listen to this. Let's get very careful. The reason they had to do that, if they didn't do it, they found out they ended up getting put in the bottom 10% by their manager. So now you see why the force ranking is probably not something that's going to be very popular ever again. That concludes our class lecture in chapter 2.